Apologize for the delay. Let's call this meeting to order. Approval of the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minute, or the agenda as written. Call for questions. I will call a question. We can either remove this from the agenda right now, or we can table it for later on the consideration of the minutes.
I would say let's leave it on there to show that it was an item.
Okay.
So it's normally in the regular part of the agenda, and so I prefer if we instead of taking it off the agenda, just tabled it until we get an opportunity to get a better copy of it. So.
Okay. Any other comments?
I make a motion that we table the regular meeting minutes.
We're going to leave it on.
Oh.
We're going to leave it on. We have a motion and a second.
On approval.
Any other comments on the motion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Public comment. Oh no. Consideration of minutes. Sorry, I'm going way too fast.
I move that we table the meetings from the minutes of June 13th, 2017 till we get a better corrected version.
I have a motion on the floor to table the minutes. That's the corrections. I have a motion and a second. Any comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Joanna, if you need a list of some of the things, we can go through them afterwards. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Public comments. Yes, ma'am.
I have some. I'm Paula Van Cleve. On your non-action items tonight, discussion of non-conforming structures or land uses, is that some of the same old sore thumb? Storage buildings, carports. Okay, then here's my opinion. There has been, I've lived here since 1975. There's been a lot of code enforcement officers, not the one sitting here right now, under a lot of former city managers, not the one sitting here, that have been told, let it go, let it ride. Never mind. Yeah, let them do it. That's okay. So I do not see how what we've been working on and talking about for the past 3 years is ever going to work, ever going to work as it stands. My opinion is that the whole thing's got to be scrapped. I think you're going to have to do something like do some inspections on stuff that is maybe not safe, make those structures be taken down or repaired. But to make people tear stuff down that's been standing for 20 years and it's structurally sound. Carports that I understand were not permitted, but they're structurally sound. The metal ones that have been around for since the 80s, if they're installed properly and they're not in danger of falling over. Just my opinion, you got to start over. And I think it's got to go with all new construction and safety features of old construction. If they, from some point only over here, they didn't get a permit, then they're in the wrong. They get fined, they tear it down, they get the permits, they do whatever they've got to do. But anything that's pre-existing has to be left alone unless it's unsafe. My opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There will be a time that this comes as an action item, and I think that yourself and people that carry that same opinion it would be good if you came with the definition of what you think is structurally sound.
Well, I can give you one item that's not structurally sound, and it's just down the road. Crystal and I talked about it. It's got red tape around it, and it's leaning like this. That's most definitely not structurally sound.
Blocks.
I know, but as we go through and we want to define things, if we're going to work together as a community to put something together.
Well, yeah, and because I think you have to consider the material. what kind of material did they use to build it? Or if it's one of those metal things, what did they use to anchor it down?
Okay. Those are just thoughts that I think that when it comes time for that commentary, it would be good.
Okay, are we gonna have a work session anytime?
We'll find out what staff's plans are with respect to this
Okay.
and how it's gonna go. This has been, as you're well aware, it's been an ongoing discussion since the beginning of the year, so. Okay, any other public comments? With that, non-action items, discussion of traffic control methods and policies within the city.
We have citizens that call in from time to time, wanting us to place a stop sign in their area or speed bumps in their area because they think traffic is going too quickly through their neighborhood. We currently don't have anything in our code to address how these things are implemented, what causes these implementations to take place. So we've been looking at a couple of other cities' neighborhood traffic control problems. They have management plans in place to where the citizens can actually get together as a group and come before us to help recommend what type of traffic control they would want in their neighborhood. And in most of these plans, there is these are some of the items that they have just on what type of signages can be used, what type of it's right here. Just to improve the safety of a neighborhood, to create cut-through traffic. It's a big issue in a lot of neighborhoods. It's where people don't want to take the regular routes because they're busy. After school, you see a lot of cut-through traffic going through neighborhoods. These type of things is what the plan would help alleviate if it's done properly. Open this. Go ahead.
Okay, so with the neighborhood traffic program, you know, different cities have found, I mean, different states. I know Hobbs, they developed one, I believe it was, 2 years ago they started that. That was kind of that slow your roll campaign. But it also just looked at the traffic problems that residential neighborhoods have. So, you know, you want to discourage that cut through traffic, and I know we get a lot of requests for speed bumps. Speed bumps aren't always the answer, but we really don't have any criteria other than just kind of a rule of thumb, or let's see what PD has, look at accident rates. You know, just look at the neighborhood traffic flow. Maybe we need to get traffic counts, but a uniform means to where we can have staff go out, evaluate it, and determine based on that what would be the best measures. So, of course, you know, stop signs. We know what a stop sign's for. They're not always obeyed, but they're supposed to be there to regulate that traffic flow and identify who has that right of way. But it doesn't necessarily reduce speeding. Studies are there where that comment's been brought up several times, where we've had requests for stop signs to be put in different locations because of a speeding problem, and that doesn't necessarily always solve it. You can have yield signs. There's other options out there to control our traffic other than putting speed bumps in or putting up another stop sign. So with the main emphasis of enhancing safety through education, through enforcement, and also engineering. So we gave you an example of the Hobbs model just to kind of peruse. I know staff are going to do a little bit more investigation and come up with some type of a plan, and really defer to your experience as an engineer with roads. And use this body to come up, formulate some type of a policy, so that way we can actually deliver results to the citizens and actually get more citizen involvement and participation in designing something that will enhance safety in our residential neighborhoods. This is just kind of the start. I know it's, I think the Hobbs document was 16 pages. There, I believe it was the city of Albuquerque, or maybe it was Bernalillo County. Theirs was 132 pages. We didn't provide that. We provided some links to some different ones you can look at, but come up with some ideas, and we can discuss it and come up with something that fits us as Lovington.
So, for anybody that hasn't had a chance to look at this yet, this really requires the neighborhood to get involved. In other words, if you want to look at some kind of traffic control means and method, it takes 67% of your block to come together and sit there and say, you know what, we have a problem.
I'm 100% of my block.
Well, the vote will be easy one way or the other on yours. And so, but it requires that. And once that information is gathered and the thought process has gone through, then it goes through what are the available tools to solve the issues that have been identified. And with that, the city has to put aside a set of funds that goes with that, that would help different neighborhoods be able to take care of that. Now, if the study turns around and says that it's not really warranted, there's not enough traffic counts, in other words, less than 500 vehicles a day, or pick a number, whatever it is, then in the community, that block still wants that. The block has the option of paying for that. Same thing as well. So this is really something that in my opinion, is a good thing for us to look at, and might actually start bringing some more public involvement in. And actually having a say-so, getting more involved, having a say-so in what we're doing within the town. I think this is a great effort from staff.
And we've had one guy call in twice within the last year that just people go too fast. And the chief has actually had that area looked into, and there's nobody else in the neighborhood complained. There's hardly any traffic there. There's not any speeding traffic tickets there. So that would be one of these where he wouldn't have the rest of the neighborhood enforcement behind him to do anything in this area. But at least that would let him know he would have a revenue to see what he needed to do, and it would make him feel better that he was able to try to do something about it. Instead of just the point is now, it's like, well, we really don't have anything to offer him to make him feel like he tried to do something.
So have you identified certain cut-through neighborhoods that are really are legitimately overused, or the speed is being taken advantage of in those neighborhoods? And
that's something we'd have to look through when we wanted to look into what the plan would be, because when you make one of these plans for the neighborhoods, you have to identify which neighborhoods would benefit from this program, and that's all in the application of the neighborhood trying to get the implementation made.
So this is primarily instigated by the neighborhood. It's not something that we have to go through and do a blanket research for the whole community. It's just on a as-needed basis.
Yes.
So as it stands now, someone in the neighborhood calls, and then you do the research based on ticketing.
Well, the way, if we set up one of these neighborhood traffic management plans, there would be a set, then we would refer that neighbor to this plan. And then the plan goes from there, where they have to collect signatures from so many neighbors, and they have to do their part and then bring it to the city before it's looked at.
I think the question at hand was what do we do now?
Yeah, what's the process now?
Well,
like,
that's,
I know
that's
on
why we
Avenue
had
K,
this discussion is this something that planning and zoning would be interested in looking more into as to developing a plan like this for the city?
we have numerous traffic control devices right across the street that if you identify these areas, maybe one could be set up to watch the area here and there to identify if they are actual problems or not, without 67% of the neighborhood getting involved, because it's kind of hard sometimes to get people involved in any issue going on in Lovington as a whole, when it's a citywide issue, much less a neighborhood issue. So could that be like a beginning stage? I mean, I'm not saying that, it's not happening, but.
I think the traffic control devices that you're talking about would be part of the plan. In other words, but it does truly take the this concept takes the neighborhood to sit there and say, you know what, we have a problem here. How do we fix it? Let's identify it, and then, Chief does get involved, and his team does get involved, different people get involved. Yes, sir.
What I was going to add to that was, right now, the process, when we do have these requests come in, is we do go to the police department. So they do, it is complaint driven, and so the officers do go over there, beef up enforcement. This is just taking that to that next level. We're not saying it takes 67% for an officer to go over there. It takes one person, and that's how it is, how it's been right now. One person calls in, and we look at that situation. So we rely on that enforcement, and also their professional opinion is, just because we put a stop sign there doesn't mean somebody's going to stop.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, like, so once they go, are they writing tickets? Enough tickets to say, yes, this is a troubled area? Or are they, it's not, are you finding anything to back up the callers?
David Rodriguez, Chief of Police, Lovington. Just to let you know, when we do get these requests, that we do go out there, as you're well aware, as soon as they see my officers, they're the best law-abiding citizens that we have. Therefore, it makes it almost extremely impossible for us to ticket anybody when they're actually driving correctly. Just by somebody calling in and saying the violation's there doesn't necessarily mean that we could actually enforce it.
Right.
So,
that wasn't what I meant to imply, that you weren't doing anything.
But
are your officers' observations backing up that these are problem areas?
no, because they're the best law-abiding citizens. When we get there, they drive properly, they do everything like they're supposed to. There's nothing that we could go off.
And in most cities that have done these type of plans, they say the policy encourages residents to become more actively involved in the decision-making for their area, because they live there, they want to make it better. So in most cities, they've reported that it has helped those areas.
When you get to 67% to come in and say that there is a problem, you have the petitions, everything's signed, how much does it cost to do a study of the neighborhood?
James.
With that, we don't know right now.
Yeah.
This is
Preliminary.
as far as the 67%, we may have an even lower threshold. These are just examples of what other communities have done. So we haven't really sat down and looked to see exactly what are the true costs behind this. This was just to introduce it, get some suggestions, feedback, like is 67%. We have people in neighborhoods who may not speak to each other and be next door neighbors for 40 years. We have that a lot. So just some ideas from this body as far as things that staff may not see when creating something.
I know Casper, Wyoming, theirs is like an 80% in their city neighborhood.
What is it?
Traffic plan, it's an 80%. That 80% of the neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhood has to agree to the process. So there's different cities have different qualifications for what it takes for the city to actually start to get involved.
Okay. So what you're asking us to do is to begin the investigating process of how we'll approach this and apply it.
And if we want to look at something.
So there's what they did include in your packet for your review is the City of Hobbs plan. And through that plan, if you go into it a couple of pages, it talks about what happens when somebody submits a concern for a neighborhood. And it goes through the preliminary study phase, it goes through how their process, the City of Hobbs' process for how it ranks out, how the plan is developed, and how it's implemented. And so those are the things that I would venture to guess staff is asking us to really dive into and think about how we could, is this something that the Planning and Zoning Committee thinks is something that would work for the for the town of Lovington and benefit us overall. Personally, I think it's a good thing. What this does is it put, so many times we sit here and we have conversations since I've been on this team that we have a problem in town. We know that there's a problem. When we start addressing the problem, we get direction by the city commission to address it. We hold our public involvement meetings, we hold our work sessions, we ask for input, we go through all of that. We spend a year getting to the point in time where we make a decision. The commission approves or denies it. When they approve it, it becomes an ordinance. And then all of a sudden, when it starts going into implementation phase, we have problems. Well, you didn't tell us. No, we told everybody. They just chose not to come. And pardon the abruptness there, but with respect to this is something that the city would implement. It's an ordinance that truly does have a cost to the city from the aspect that the city has to fund it if it's decided, if it's proved justifiable. And so the city commits to putting funds aside to help with that neighborhood issue. But it also takes the community's involvement so that at this point in time, we're no longer telling them what has to happen on that block. They have to make that choice. If they have an issue.
That clears it up for me a lot. Since
So,
Well, and it also
that sounds
helps.
good to me, I mean, exactly for that reason, because we have gone over things over and over. Ms. Van Cleve is here religiously
oh yeah.
on issues that a lot of people we feel at times should be here for. And then when something goes, or gets implemented or turns into an ordinance, then we all cry or complain or start, well, when did this happen? Well, it's been happening. It's been happening over and over and over. Every meeting, some of it happens, and then it becomes an ordinance, and that's when people care. So, yeah, thank you for that explanation.
And if I stated anything incorrect, let me know. But that's the way I see how this plan rolls together and the intention of it.
So are we looking for a motion now to?
No, this is a non-action item. This is
We're just discussing it.
So I would
Kind of some headway on, you guys want me to look further into this plan?
I really think you should, and bring us a little more matters.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it.
Oh, no.
If nobody even wanted to look at it, so.
my personal opinion is that we, as this commission, the directives that we take are one from the community and one from the commission. And so for stuff like this from your team, and this is just my opinion, you know, taking this in front of the commission and sitting there saying, hey, this is something that we think is a good idea. And then getting them to say, you know what, yeah, I want you to invest your time and effort into this, and I want the Planning and Zoning Committee and or other parts to be involved. You know, you may have a whole portion of the community that sits there and says, hey, we really need to look at the park, you know. And yes, that's a city-controlled area, but it's still highly trafficked. There's a lot of traffic from driving and from foot traffic and stuff like that. What are the concerns that go with that? I see this going in so many different areas, not just into a neighborhood.
Well, that's why it would be addressed. It wouldn't be to control any kind of traffic control for your main avenues. That is usually what these neighborhood traffic management plans, they're not for arterial streets or, what's the other one?
No. Collectors.
Collector streets.
Yeah.
They are strictly for your
Right.
smaller neighborhood streets.
But that's the problem. We have some of our streets that act like arterials and collectors.
But they're not.
Yeah, right.
And that's where
Maybe
one of
Second
these
Street
plans
is
would
There
bring
is
it
this
out.
Avenue A or B that from Second to Ninth doesn't have a stop sign. It acts like an arterial, but it's not.
That's-
That's true.
And
The
so.
people in the neighborhood have no idea what you're talking about when you
Yeah.
say that.
It just means that it's wide enough and long enough for people to go without stopping.
Fast.
That's the way I define it. So, and it connects to another major road.
And the plan's not.
In other words, when you're a delivery boy in Lovington, like I was in high school, you know the streets to get on,
To get
to
through
get the
town
food
quickly.
there before it gets cold.
And where you can speed and where you can't.
Yeah. Yeah, grab every Domino's driver there is and we'll figure it out real quick. All right, so do you want to have this as another discussion point on the next one, or is this going to go in front of the commission first, or how do you plan on proceeding?
Mr. Chair, honestly, I think that it'll probably take some more discussion before we even bring it forth as an action item. Probably tweak it and refine it and take it to commission and see if they're even going to be interested. I have a feeling that they will, but before we waste a substantial amount of time, this is the consensus I'm gathering is that, yeah, you guys are very supportive of this. We get the support on the other end from the commission. We're good, and we'll get it with everything you got.
And you know what I love about this is this so much ties into what is being done on Main Street, and that if we could get people to go to those meetings and see what they're talking about with the reason why they're drilling traffic down and pushing it and doing certain items in certain places for safety reasons, for people, for controlling that traffic, and saying, hey, we want you, but we want you to be safe when you're going through our neighborhood. And so, you neck it down in such a way that it makes the truck driver make the decision to go commercial or industrial instead of dealing with that. And so I think that this bleeds right into something major that's going to happen within the city over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
And what I'm seeing is it's not just speeding. I mean, that's the most, dangerous that we're trying to prevent. But like I see bike lanes, other things that are gonna safen the city, It's not all just about speeding.
No, there's a lot of different, they
We
call
don't
them
really have a lot of
traffic
bike lanes in
calming events.
Right.
There's a lot of different things you can do to implement traffic calming things, which I know a lot of them are very against speed bumps in a lot of areas. That does deter your ambulance and your fire trucks, because ambulance and fire trucks have to almost come to a stop to go over speed bumps.
Right.
So, that would also help, because a lot of people call it, oh, we need a speed bump. Well, if they knew what that causes to have a speed bump in their area, then they might not think that that would be the best answer. And it would give them other avenues to take to try to control that.
Agreed. All right. Move on to the next one. Discussion of non-conforming structures and land issues.
So I'm going to stand, because I've been sitting all day. All right, so this does address what Ms. Van Cleve had brought up earlier, the whole issue of not just carports, but accessory buildings, anything else. So kind of a review, of course, during the April 6th work session, we had, at that time, the chairman was the vice chair. He requested that we discuss this with the city commission, because this has been one of those revolving door issues. It seems to come up every 5 or 6 years that what do we do? We've got all these carports, and staff is in a dilemma, because really, what direction do we need to take? Because the ugly truth is that the law is the law, and if we're supposed to enforce the law, we need to follow it, not just pick and choose what is convenient for us. So we discussed the RV, of course this was led by RV parks. There was no change in ordinance, there wasn't even a suggested change in ordinance. This was just a discussion, I guess, to find out what direction commission wanted to go. So no proposed changes were introduced. They were talking about that the regulations regarding those carports and accessory structures have been in place for decades. Now, as far as the work session, whenever we were discussing this, and this was actually, Dave Rouser submitted a document to me that's actually in your packet. It's the one marked rough draft. or citizen, I can't remember what it was, titled in red. But this kind of primed this whole discussion that we're having today, as far as what we can, one potential solution, not the solution. There hasn't been anything, even the draft of an ordinance written up. This is just a potential solution to look at how other communities have addressed this problem. But discuss this with the mayor, and I know that we had discussed wanting to have a work session. Talking with the mayor, he said, let's start this discussion right now with planning and zoning and look at our different options so we can kind of get feedback from the members of the community on this. So whenever we did some research on this, City of Lovington, believe it or not, zoning was first mentioned in the City of Lovington back in 1931 when we were just packed to the gills with people. However, it wasn't really until the 50s that they actually had their
We were
first
actually
formal-
bigger than Hobbs at that time. By
Yes. Actually, back in the 50s, that's whenever they had a temporary planning and zoning committee to establish zoning. And then in 1958, they actually created this body that we have here today. And it wasn't until 1962 years later that they instituted the zoning code that we have. However, at that time, there wasn't an issue with carports. The carport ordinance actually wasn't brought to light until 1987 and instituted into law. So whenever you look at the City of Lovington, or the Lovington Municipal Code, you see prior code, and it's like a 1-11-3. That's the prior code before they changed the numbering system. But going back, the carport ordinance has been in place for 30 years. And accessory buildings and setbacks have been in place since 1960. So, of course, this hasn't happened overnight. So, we, as staff, we kind of sat down, we looked at a couple of different issues of why we have a problem right now. One of the first issues is that there wasn't a formal local permitting process until 2014. So right now, whenever you have, okay. The local permitting process, if you remember, some of you were on the board, we really didn't have anything formalized in the city. It's just really the only thing was people would come or apply to the state for a building permit. However, in that building permit prior to 2014, the state never ran those permits by us. And if you've ever looked at one of those CID permits, it actually looks for local body approval. And all that we sign off on is, does it conform to zoning standards? Not construction, has nothing to do with the construction. Does it meet the setbacks? Does it meet the style of construction? Does it fit? Is it zoned correctly? That's all we verify. So we establish that formal process. It doesn't approve the state building permit. The final approval comes from CID. So they issue that permit. So they actually institute this process, but prior to that, we very rarely received them. And actually up until probably about 2 years ago, there was still some that we weren't getting. However, we've worked that out with the state, and now we have a process that is actually adequate for all of the new construction. But once again, we come back to the ugly monster of what about all of the prior stuff that we have. So it doesn't really address those non-conformance issues to stuff that was built prior to 2014. So the solution, we want to continue the process that we have. We feel that we've got a good permitting process where Crystal has the opportunity to review these permits. Now, I know that the state application process changed. It was about 3 months ago, a letter came out from the state saying that anybody who wanted to build something that required a state building permit, which is if it's bigger than 120 square foot, instead of coming here and filling out the application, the individual who was building the structure was going to have to go to the CID field office in either Santa Fe, Albuquerque, or Las Cruces. So if you think about that, has the potential to, if you want to build a carport, you're going to have to take an entire day off of work to travel over to Las Cruces or Albuquerque. Fortunately, though, Crystal really got on the ball. We sent them a strongly worded letter saying that's not really fair. We have a department that can look at this to verify that these are the individuals who own the property and they are who they say they are. That is essentially what that directive was, is to verify the identity of that person. So we finally have that resolved to where we are actually able to do that locally now, thanks to Crystal's efforts. However, as far as the non-conformance, we have the staff in place now to make sure that whatever is submitted to us is going to meet those setback requirements, is going to conform to the different zoning standards that we have locally. In addition to that, it's going to take public education. We haven't quite figured out that piece of the pie yet as far as how. I mean, we've had several public meetings. You can see that we have our faithful public here. But in the instance, I know we had some, when we had a lot of residential construction, we set up 2 or 3 days, actually through, I want to say it was either through the chamber or EDC, they set up meetings where they had realtors there, we had the state there, we had different local departments, we had the planning department there to educate home buyers and property buyers, this is what you need to do if you want to build. And we had maybe 19 people show up out of 15,000. So it's trying to get the word out there. So we're still working on that piece just to educate the public. There's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. But most of all, we want to work with people. So the second issue that we've identified was that there's no records of state building permits really on file here consistently prior to 2014. Okay? We don't have those permits. And it can be difficult to get those from the state. We do not, staff do not have the resources to request copies of building permits issued for prior construction. As an experiment, I went to the CID website and they have a thing or a link on there where you can go and you can look up a building permit. You know what you have to do? For each building permit, you have to submit it in writing to them. It's not a form fillable thing where you, or a contact us form, or even a website portal. It's old school. You have to type up a letter and send it to them. And as far as a wait for that, I don't know. But we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to look up on these structures that may be 20 or 30 years old if they have a state building permit. Personally, and I've directed staff, that is not our job, is not to enforce state building code. I've actually discussed this with our state building inspector, our local representative, and told them, that's your job. We pay you to do that. So, of course, if it's 120 square feet or larger, it does require that. City code, we basically require that if it require a roof supported in conformance with the state building code is modified from time to time. If it has a roof on it, it does need to meet that state building code. But that's the state inspector. So the solution to that particular issue that we've come up with is we continue our permitting process as normal. They do have to have that state building permit, but the first stop is here. We sign off on that CID building permit and then they submit that to the state. Once it goes to the state, that's out of our hands. They get that back, we're good to go. Enforcing or possessing a state building permit prior to 2014, that's the responsibility of the state. I know that we've had public comment where individuals have come in and said, you know, I bought this particular home with this carport, where am I going to find a state building permit? The city's not going to come in and enforce that state building code. That is not our job. It's code enforcement, Lovington Municipal Code enforcement. We're just going to make sure that setbacks are adhered to. We're going to make sure that whatever is in our zoning code is adhered to. Because from a staff perspective, we don't need to be wasting time and resources researching state building permits. Third solution, or third problem that we had, structures not meeting setbacks or construction requirements. And yes, this has to do with metal carports. That is actually in the code. So whenever we look at setback requirements, setbacks, of course, we require site plans in our local permitting process. You basically provide us a sketch of your site plan. And that way we make sure that, is this structure one going to be placed to meet those setbacks, front yard, side yard, distance from adjacent structures? Is there enough room for it? We identify that. If it does, that's great. Older structures that were built and do not conform with the setbacks for different various causes, whether it may be a size, it may have been never even really gone through the permitting process here locally. We see that with a lot of older homes. So the setbacks, you got to remember, it begins at the property line. Now they're in place for safety, number one, with sight distance, especially with automobiles for pedestrian safety. We also have some privacy and reduce that perception of crowding. But also the most important of those 4 items up there, what I value as the most 2 important things are safety and infrastructure development. We've had a couple of instances where people have built an accessory building or even built a house that encroaches on those setbacks. Okay? such as an alley or even a street. We have a couple examples of that. That poses a problem, one, for if it is a carport or if it's a garage, somebody backing out, you may not be able to see that sidewalk, if there is a sidewalk in that neighborhood, or even a pedestrian or a bicyclist riding down the street. Infrastructure development, if we have to come in and replace water lines, sewer lines. We also have franchise agreements where we have power, we have fiber optic, we have gas lines. And you build a structure that's over it or onto that setback, the fact of the matter is we can come in there and we don't have to replace that if it gets torn up, if it's on that setback. It does pose those problems. Now, does the city want to do that? No. But if we can prevent the problem before it happens, it makes our lives easier. The importance of setbacks. Now, these are off Google Earth and they aren't exactly head down, okay? These are just some examples from a bird's eye view. If you drive by and you recognize these structures, they actually do conform to setback requirements. So this first one, if you look, okay, most roads in town, if you look at a plat like, well, my mom lives on this street, okay? This is a 60-foot platted road. It's only built out to like 34 feet, okay? So on either side, you're gonna have that 10 to 15 feet, which is actually right of way, or it may even be an easement, okay? In the instance of a carport, you have to build that carport where you've got 5 feet of yard space between that and that setback, okay? The reason that's important is sidewalks. We do have to comply with ADA standards now. Whenever we build a road, and in particular if there's access to a public facility, we have to assure that there's adequate pedestrian access. I know everybody believes that walking in the road is fine. I run in the road. It's kind of a good gauge of how the community feels about you. I'm still alive. But we have to build sidewalks now. Part of our CDBG funding was contingent on, do we have an ADA transition plan? I don't know if any of y'all remember, we had to push that through because if you don't have that transition plan in certain components, you lose any chance of getting federal funding and also state funding, because a lot of your state funding is contingent upon federal funding. So we have to put in those sidewalks. We can't just have it on paper saying, well, we're gonna do this. We actually have to apply this. So in this particular case, the home is built. We have plenty of room on either side for putting those sidewalks in. You don't have any site issues. You don't have any issues with us having to get in there to put in additional infrastructure. Now, granted, you can argue that we don't put utilities in the road, which we don't. However, if you notice, well, in this particular area, we have light poles that go down our roadways. We have franchise agreements with the electric company, with telecommunication companies, that they can use our right-of-ways and easements to proliferate the area with their wares. Now, this is another, now like I said, this is an overhead view, but if you look, does anybody see something wrong with this particular picture?
Carports.
Exactly. If you look, now like I said, you drive by this neighborhood, these do meet. I want to stress that for the public who may be watching. This is just an example, okay? But if you look right here, these encroach way over our setback. And look where the sidewalk is. So, that sidewalk doesn't meet ADA standards. We have to put in an ADA compliant sidewalk if we reconstruct this road. What happens to the carport? The carport has to come down, unfortunately. That's one solution. Not the most optimal, but like I said, prevention is one of those things. Granted, that structure has been up. I can tell you that both of these, they do meet setback requirements, but when you look at it on Google Earth, it's like, holy cow. It's just the way the satellite was. So, some other requirements, construction materials. In Zone A, and this seems to be where we have the majority of our problems, I would say that, you know, when Crystal did her little analysis, whenever she was looking at conformance, we had setback issues, we had construction types. In Zone A, it actually says that it has to be constructed of metal or wood of such a design and size and conform to the design and materials and be attached. Okay, so the carport, the pre-made carports basically that you can go down and buy off of Main Street or over in Seminole or Hobbs, which we see a lot of those going up. If you live in Zone A, those do not conform. They're not attached. Yes, you may have a metal roof, but they're not attached to the home. So we have an issue there with conforming to zoning standards. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Okay? I am a firm believer in carports. So, and the reason being is we live in a hail area. We were just discussing this. And you know, even though I don't have hail damage at my home, everybody else who has hail damage on their cars, that affects my insurance. So I'd much rather have a carport. So some of the solutions that we've come up with is setbacks. I'm sorry, but they're necessary. They have to be conformed with. So the permitting process would identify any design issues and have the building up, catch it before it even goes to permitting and they start construction. Now, pre-existing structures, if they don't meet those setbacks, they need to be removed or modified to where they're out of that setback area. And then also we can eliminate that conform to design. Okay, that is more of an aesthetic feature, I believe. Okay, as this was brought up, as long as they are anchored properly, they're not going to blow away. This is an aesthetic issue, and I think that's where HOAs or homeowners associations need to take care of. If you have a problem with your neighbor having a metal carport in your neighborhood, that's why you have the importance of an HOA. That's where the HOA enforces those restrictive covenants. That group gets together and they can modify those covenants. Restrictive covenants are not enforced by the city. That's strictly a homeowner association deal. But that is one solution that we've come up with. It's not the answer. So how have we addressed nonconformance? All right. So in the past, we've always issued variances. Okay. This allows for that exception to zoning. Where basically our definition, we came up with guidelines, is that it would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, or mainly it would deprive the owner of beneficial use of their property. Well, our variances we came up with back in 2014 because we were just getting flooded with these things. One is that it's going the request. It's basically saying you really need to bring this up into compliance. Okay. However, the compliance issue is not due to action or choice of the property owner. It's not used to increase financial gain or reduce financial hardship, adversely affect public safety, substantially or permanently interfere with the appropriate use of the conforming property in the same district, and it will not alter essential characteristic of the zoning district. That's straight out of policy that was instituted by this body. All right, a variance is basically saying it's okay to break the law. Okay, so addressing non-conformance, of course, Mr. Rouser here, he provided a document which kind of, to summarize it, is you need to remove the illegally constructed structures, bring it into compliance, or there's a penalty fee assessed. Okay? Well, we looked at how other communities have done stuff like this, and Torrance County actually has a couple of different options that, my gosh. Torrance County in New Mexico, they can issue certificates of nonconformance, which those basically say that it's going to allow the continued survival of that until they're removed, but it doesn't encourage it stay in place. It's very similar to a variance, a little bit change in language. It doesn't allow you to alter, it doesn't allow you to enlarge or extend the violating structure. And in the event that it's damaged or destroyed, and to the extent of more than 50% of its replacement costs, you don't get to rebuild it as is. You have to rebuild it per code. The other thing that they have is what we call a conditional use permit. It's very similar to nonconformance, however, it limits the time of that permit. So going off of that, one of the solutions that we came up with is a possible process, conditional use permits. Okay, I know that it's been suggested that, well, we grandfather everything in. Okay, granted, our permitting process that we have now is going to catch this stuff. However, we're basically, if we grandfather everybody in, it's like saying, well, it's okay, you broke the law, we're just going to turn our head away. But everybody else has to comply with it. Okay? If the roles were reversed, if I had a non-conforming carport and it was grandfathered in, oh yeah, I'd be happy. However, me, if I want to, well, now I've got to conform all this. My neighbor down the street, he built his carport into the middle of the street because he likes to park in the street. Why can't I build mine? I mean, really, think about it. If roles were reversed, people would be singing a different tune. But like I said, this is a possible process. It would be filed with the county. I don't believe in charging fees unless they're justified to recoup expenses. So anytime we have a variance request, it takes staff time. There's a filing fee that we have to do over at the courthouse. It's $25 a document. We're looking at printing, we're looking at mailing, we're looking at advertising. So it would be a fee based on square footage. Don't know what that number is. Haven't really worked it up because this is just a possible solution. Nothing is firm or solidified, but just enough to recoup that so we're not going into the hole on this. But also it would have to be submitted in a timely fashion. When we look at this, so basically the conditional use permit would be submitted to our coordinator, Crystal. This will be posted on our agenda. We would produce a sign, which would basically be a piece of paper that would be posted on the property to let neighbors know, hey, this is what's going. This is a contemplated action. Also, owners would be notified if they own property within 100 feet of the proposed changes. They would be notified by mail of the public hearing. It would go to planning and zoning. So guidelines for approval. So basically, we would make sure that the property is still accessible. It does meet those, you would make sure that automobiles, pedestrians, is still accessible. It's not something that's going to grossly interfere with that property. There's no negative impact on the economic conditions, no excessive noise. The nice thing about this just doesn't apply to carports. This could be for other non-conforming uses that we encounter. The site is an adequate size and shape to accommodate it. And also, if, for instance, somebody wants to put in a barbershop, okay, let's say that they're remodeling their existing business downtown. They can't occupy it, but they want to stay in business. So they want to run a barbershop out of their garage, okay? So they want to go ahead and get this special use or conditional use permit for a set period of time. One of the things that we would assess is that's operating a business. It's not necessarily a home occupation. Is the street and the traffic situation going to be able to accommodate the increased parking demands, increased traffic flow, because this is a very popular place or something like that. So, oh my gosh, limits, you would have to renew this annually because the objective is, let's try to bring this into conformance. But this would also allow somebody, let's say, well, honestly, you know, if it's a setback, a side yard setback issue or something like that, let's try to bring this into conformance. But the renewal process would be the same thing. However, you couldn't make any significant changes in operations or the characteristics of the use or the size of the non-conforming structure. And if, for instance, they go in and they decide, well, I've got this nice little two-car carport, but I want to add room for a third car and it doesn't conform, we have the ability to revoke that permit at that time. As far as approval, we looked at this, and I think that I know if this solution is considered and instituted, we're going to get, how many carports did you find? 243, I believe it was. We're going to get 243 of these that staff will have to evaluate. But I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission would approve or deny the request. But instead of all 243 of these go automatically to the commission, is we use the commission as, yes, the final say, but it would only be if somebody they wanted to appeal the decision of this particular body. Making government, believe it or not, try to make it a little bit more efficient. So, in summary, some of the proposed changes is state code is enforced by the state. Setbacks have to be adhered to. All right. We make some changes in our zoning code. There is going to be some expense, but we would allow for non-conforming uses through the adoption of a conditional use permit. Now, why, I was trying to, whenever we were discussing this with staff, came up with, why is this important? I know I mentioned grandfathering and everything, but I look at this. It was August 11th, 2013, I got the first speeding ticket that I had ever received in probably 20 or 30 years, it seemed. Long time, okay? I was on my way to Artesia, came out of Riverside, kicked it back up to 65 on the cruise, and guess what? All of a sudden, pretty lights were in my rearview mirror. I got pulled over by a cop. Sheriff, Said, you know why I pulled you over? No, sir, I don't. He goes, well, you were speeding. I said, I was going 65. He said, the sign back there says 55. I thought I was right. I didn't see the sign. I was ignorant of the law. I was still wrong. I still got the ticket. You can't, just because you're, ignorance of the law is no excuse for not conforming to code, just like ignorance of zoning code. Granted, that's where we need to educate the public. These are the codes that you have to adhere to whenever you are going to build something in Lovington, so we can avoid these futures. You know, and just like running a stop sign. You know, how many times do you run a stop sign and it's right? The law is the law, right? But that is one potential solution. It is not the answer. But we wanted to kind of start a discussion. This is one potential solution. Because I know right now we have on the table grandfathering. This is another potential solution. But we do need an answer instead of just directing staff to turn a blind eye, because we do have to address the issue that we can't turn a blind eye on the code. We can't pick and choose what we want to enforce. And that's all I have.
Any questions for staff?
So, I have a question. So that basically, well, everything sounded pretty cool until you said the 243 people would come to this, and then we would be the decisions. So that skips exactly what Randy went to the commission for, where we get guidance saying, what do you want to do? It turns it back on us. Is that not correct? And then if they don't like what we decide, then they go to the commission.
Well, right now, sir, the process is that an individual, if they request a variance, the variance comes to this body. This body makes a recommendation that again gets forwarded to City Commission. City Commission has that final say. In this particular case, the suggestion that we have is that, yes, staff gets the information, we submit this to planning and zoning, you either approve or deny it. In the event that the person doesn't like the denial, they can appeal it to the City Commission, but it does not go to the City Commission automatically like variances have in the past.
That's basically the same thing that we were trying to avoid, isn't it?
Well, it is. I feel like one of your slides up there kind of indicated that the commission was behind the fact that the ordinance is the ordinance, the law is the law, and we need to enforce it. Now, that may have been an interpretation that's incorrect, but that's what I read.
Yeah, no, that is incorrect. That is my personal opinion,
Okay.
that the law is a law. The commission right now, I honestly don't know what type of direction that they would take. I do believe that they don't want to turn a blind eye to the law. We do need to fix the code to address that particular issue.
Does the document that created this board actually give us the ability to be the final word?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked it.
You have to research that.
I'm gonna have to research. I don't believe it does, but that would be part of this. This would
change.
If this was
Right.
a solution that this body and the city commission agreed on, that language would be incorporated into the procedure for the special use permit.
You can't think of everything. You do your best.
I'm just one man, sir.
I know.
With a heck of a team supporting you know, there's some pieces of this I really like, and not that I don't like the whole thing. I just haven't had a chance to truly digest it all. I like the part where you basically charge a lease agreement to somebody that goes beyond the setbacks.
The
Or
typed
goes
out
in.
document, that's actually Mr. Rouser's
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
document. He put that together. He did a good job, so.
And I don't think that I understand what you're saying about imposing fees. I think that there's a certain amount of stuff that you know, the municipality has an obligation to serve. That's part of the taxes that people are paid. But as we as we grow in the communities and needs change, some of those things aren't really incorporated into the base tax that was defined as what those services are. And so there's some things about this document that I think are pretty enticing. I don't know how you would enforce them, but
If I may, the one thing, whenever I look at, with the carport and the accessory issue, I have to agree on one of your points, and I think it was the strongest point. Is the structure safe? The two things that I care about with the carport issue that we have is, as long as it meets setbacks and it's not going to fall over and hurt somebody, I mean, I'm good with that. But we still have the other issues of nonconformance, and I think the biggest one is that it doesn't match the characteristic of the home.
Well, to me, that's wrong. It shouldn't matter, because if you own a really nice brick home, you can't have anything but this nice fancy brick carport. Well, if you buy the house and you want a carport but you can't afford to make it look just like the brick home, well, then you just can't have it. Well, that's not fair to one person to be this way and the other person not to be. Say you live in B, which you live in B. You can have any kind of carport you want. But in A, it has to conform with the house. Well, that's not equal.
But that's the choice
It's
you
not
made.
equal
when you
rights.
chose to move into
It's
A.
not equal rights. Your
But no, it's the
Constitution
choice you
has
made.
equal rights.
No, that has nothing to do with the Constitution.
It's in everything, because
Okay.
you have equal right to have whatever.
Well, let me ask
If
you a
one person
question.
has it, you have the equal right to have the same thing.
Okay, but every person has a right to have a decent living space. So you have a person that lives next to you.
Where's that written?
Well, that's what, we're back to HOAs.
Okay.
Okay, but
I missed that one in the
your
Constitution.
property value isn't just what you put into your property, it's what your neighbors do next door to you. Okay, so if you have someone over there that's running a kennel, or they're burning, despicable things in the backyard, which they shouldn't be, or whatever the thing is, and the odors come over, now your property has become devalued. The idea is that if we're going to talk equality, let's all keep the same standard so we can all maintain the same value of the home. Now, I agree. I'm a person that wants to do what I want to do on my property, but as a person, as part of a neighborhood and a community, I have a responsibility to my neighbors. All right? Now, if I want to do what I want to do, I'll move out in the country and I'll raise cattle or whatever it is that I'm doing. But you have to be respectful for your neighbors. It's part of being a good citizen in your community.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What about the young lady that bought a house in that zone A with an existing carport? Now, why should she have to rip that down because it's not built out of the same kind of material as the house?
Paperwork, did you look into her paperwork?
Well, it falls
It says
back
she's in
into,
Yeah, it's just.
what James was saying, of ignorance of law does not make it legal.
No,
If you didn't, because I've been house shopping myself, and I've seen several of them. And I
That's not the
haven't bought
intent of that
because
checkout
most of them
that
I've looked at,
But
but
I
I
don't-
don't have an issue.
I don't understand how a carport correct me if I'm wrong, was it not attached to her house with some metal flashing or something? Or was it? I
No,
don't
it's just
remember.
sitting beside the house. She has a brick home, and it is one of those metal, put it up carports.
Okay, so she bought it not knowing that that was an illegal, which I can't understand how a carport can be illegal anyway. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's why we're looking into these conditional use permits and things like that.
Because people who
Because
get
that
caught
would
up,
help somebody like
Yeah.
that out.
it gets caught up unaware. There's a lot of laws on the books that I don't have a clue that they're on the books. I probably break some every day, just don't get caught at it. But there's too many out there for me to know them all. Yeah, I'm not talking about the traffic laws.
Yeah. When she sees you, she becomes the model citizen.
Don't we all?
Well, but didn't we have at City Council here just a little bit ago where we gave a variance to an individual who was purchasing a piece of property, and it was like the 4th time since it was built, and they finally found that it was
Yeah, he
over.
was selling.
Okay, he was selling, okay. But in those situations, is that not the job of our realtors? I mean, that's why you're giving them that percentage, is to make sure that the deeds, the titles, the abstracts, and you have your inspections and everything done. You pay all that money to have those things done, then that falls to them, and they should say, look, if you're going to buy this house, you have to take the carport down. They put it up illegally, and it's at that point. Or apply for the penalty, or whatever is adopted by the council.
I bet you most real estate people
But
disagree with you.
that's not, but, okay,
So
it's
how
not,
do you make the realtor do it?
I don't know.
You buy
The
title.
realtors
That's
aren't-
city ordinance.
The
Not
realtors
city
aren't
ordinance,
there to
that's-
enforce the law. They're
Do what?
they're there to sell a house.
That's it.
Right, but the reason they charge you the fee, if you, and we
They do
just
the
sold a
title
house.
checks and they do all that, but they do not check to see if that house was built to code and all this other
But
stuff.
that's what you pay for your inspectors
the
to
good
come
ones.
and do your home inspection for. That's what he's supposed to
Those
do.
inspectors come in there, inspect your heater, your air conditioner, your foundation and stuff like that. They don't
They
know
don't
that's
They
the law.
made me upgrade my electric, things that were out of compliance in the garage. They made me put that.
That's electrical code, yeah.
Okay, that's electrical code. So why isn't the carport part of the building code?
Well, then you need to talk to inspectors because
Okay.
they're not inspecting that part.
Okay, but see, but that's not our problem. That's not what we didn't do it
I
wrong.
understand, but
The homeowner didn't do it wrong. It's somewhere in the process that it's not being done.
Right.
And so, the thing is I park in front of your driveway. I just have 3 feet of my car in your driveway. I don't have the whole car in front of your driveway, but I do it every day. And David doesn't come and have me towed. He doesn't ticket me. He said,
No, I do.
yeah, okay. So all of a sudden you're making sure that your code is met at your facility. So if you're going to enforce it at your property, then it has to be done as a community as well.
If people.
You have a community and you have to maintain some type of order, do you not?
You have to also educate the public. You're gonna find so many people that go, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the.
No, it doesn't change it, but people get caught up in a trap. And I'm saying, let's give them a way to get out of that trap and get as close to compliant as they can without having to totally have something knocked down. Or worse yet, having the city do it and then filing a lien against your property because they want you now to pay them for tearing it down.
And
Next thing you know, you don't own the property anymore, the city does.
But that's where this other option comes into play,
And
is
that
that we're going to let you be illegal, but you're going to pay for it because there's a penalty assessed to it. And so until you get tired of paying the fee and want to bring it into compliance, you keep filing for the permit and you keep paying the fee. And it's requiring conformance to the code, but it's preventing a hardship, so to speak, on the individual in some manner or fashion.
What solution do you have for someone whose carport and or whatever was built 30 years ago?
30 years ago, it's still out of compliance today.
Yeah.
Yes, but it was never enforced, and whose fault is that?
Well, but at some point,
The person that built it.
Or the city that,
Okay.
you know, okay, we're getting an argument.
Yeah,
but still.
we're gonna, I tell you what, staff did a really good job of putting together some things that give us a move forward and at the same time helping some residents that have purchased or built and without knowledge, different items. And I think that you guys put together a good approach.
Yes, I agree with that.
How do you want to move forward with that? Do you want to go into a working session? I mean, we can announce it and have a couple of people here again.
No, Mr. Chairman, I honestly believe, yes, that we need to have more public meetings on this because, and also, we probably, let me think. I think we need to all stew on this until the next meeting see if there's any other ideas that you guys have, discuss it, and then present a good consensus to the commission before we waste a lot of time and effort of putting together a plan, a suggested ordinance to present to commission, advertise it, and then at the last minute decide that this isn't the direction we want to go. I think we need to give plenty of opportunity for public comment, public input, where they can attend these meetings. They can also attend the city commission meeting. Because the last thing I want to do is waste money on as far as, you know, we've got a lot of things that we've got to get done.
Yeah.
I know this one seems to be the hot topic, but is this going to be the answer? I do not know. We discussed this. This is one potential solution. You may go home tonight and come up with another aha moment, idea for us to discuss, but I think allowing the public to attend these meetings, to provide their input, is the best route to go. But I'm not even ready to take this to commission. I don't even know if we have any type of semblance of agreement amongst the board here. I know this is new material, but I think I would wait until our meeting next month to come up with something to present to commission. For discussion.
I'm kind of still wondering, so what was the final decision by the commission? Just not have a workshop, they don't want to deal with it, don't want to go away?
At that point, actually, I just discussed with the mayor, trying to get everybody here as far as the work session. I know talking to the mayor, he thought this would be a good idea to address. However, with between summer vacations, I know this week we have a municipal league conference. Just trying to coordinate meetings to get everybody here. It's not something I want to wait on. I wanted to go ahead and just start the conversation now. They may want to have a joint meeting discussion to hash out these issues. They're not opposed to have a session. But once again, we will take any action at that particular session. It was discussion.
This information that has kind of today about what Randy went in one direction,
Okay. The easy answer was no direction. Honestly, the solution was let's have a work session, planning and zoning, so discuss this. So there was no direction to the staff. There was no direction to change the ordinance. That was brought up in a meeting. The ordinance is still the ordinance as it was written back in 1987 with a couple of changes that we made the past couple of years. With the biggest one, I think, being allowing for a larger size carport. But really, that was all it was let's have a work session. But just trying to coordinate it to where we can get everybody here has been somewhat of an issue.
I think that the staff has stepped forward with trying to come up with some potential solutions for when we do have a work session. And some ways that gives the commission some thought process to deal with. And I think we continue on next time. Are you going to announce it as a work session, or are you going to announce it? Are we going to do both, have a P&Z meeting and work session?
The easiest thing for us to do is just have a notice of potential quorum attached to our legal notice. That way the commission can actually attend.
Okay.
And not just have a special work session. The problem with special work sessions is it costs money. Okay? Most of our commissioners wouldn't be able to be here until after 5, and then I've got to pay a couple of folks overtime to attend the meetings. So just trying to save some of that money. But I think the easiest thing to do is that if they have the ability to show up, they can, and we don't run into any Open Meetings Act issues. I know the county does this for every board meeting they have. They always, on the tail end of that legal notice for that meeting, they have that notice of potential quorum for the Board of Commissioners. So we can just do the same thing, and the city commissioners all know that, we have this meeting immediately following that first commission meeting every month. So this time it didn't work out because we do have that municipal league event out of town that several are attending. So.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Move on to action items. Consider recommendation of traffic control measures 13th Street and West Avenue K.
Okay, if anybody's drove around, I have 2 new streets. Actually, they're just 2 new cul-de-sacs, the west end of K and the west end of J. The landowners are trying to develop that to start selling properties, build homes on. They're putting in the water and sewer lines within the next couple of months. They're going to start that. But the issue is we have a 3-way street intersection now with 13th and K. 13th and K, the turn there, there's never been a stop sign since those roads have been there. There's not a stop sign. So when we added this cul-de-sac on K coming in, you now have a conflict in your vehicle traffic. The state manual
traffic control devices.
yeah, it suggests that you control the street with the least amount of traffic. So that would be the cul-de-sac.
Which would be the developer's obligation, not the city's.
But if I may, Mr. Chair, this road was actually platted years and years ago. The only changes that were made was a cul-de-sac and basically making these dead-end streets. This intersection, and actually on the original plats, there was never any indication of where they wanted to put the stop sign, but it does need to be there. So there's not going to be a potential problem there.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying from a development standpoint, it doesn't matter how long ago it was platted. It could have been platted back in the 1800s. When it's built out, it still has to have everything that it's supposed to have.
Had PD look into it. That intersection has had no accidents in the past 3 years. They don't have traffic violations in that area. Few speeding tickets in the area, right, in the past 3 years, but that's it.
Just be anywhere from where they come to stop, not necessarily where the infraction actually happened.
And just putting the stop sign on 13th coming on to Avenue K would just create confusion because there's never been one there, and you'd have people running the stop sign.
That would like the one on Lovington Street.
Yeah, like the new one on down on K Street.
So there's only those 2 houses, right, that go into it now?
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
I've always thought there should be a stop sign southbound on 13th Street right there. That's only because I live there. I'm kind of being biased. I have a 17-month-old daughter that, play outside. I don't know. I think of safety, and looking at it from the aerial view, it looks a little confusing, especially it's new. I know there's no one living there yet, no housing, whatever, but well, from what I see, and I guess this goes back to the traffic control, that's something that I see a lot of people taking that turn too quickly, both ways. But I mean, that's the only way that it would seem natural to put a stop sign is for southbound traffic. But like I said, I live there, so I see that every day. People taking that turn too quick.
Do you talk about the southbound traffic coming up, or were you talking
Both
about
from
them
coming
down?
from that'd be westbound traffic on K and southbound traffic on 13th. Both ways they take that turn too quick. I have yet to see how the other one's going to be because it's a new road. But
well, I just went with the state's recommendation on
right,
controlling the least amount of traffic.
I just know that I find it hard to believe that there's never been any accidents there. We'll be walking, in the neighborhood, and you see a car. There's a tree right there in that corner, which would be the south east corner. It's right across the street from
the
me.
house in the little circle dragon.
And so sometimes you don't see, there's a blind spot there, and when cars are coming westbound, they might take that turn south a little too sharp, and I don't know, it just scares me for the kids that live there,
Yeah.
in the entire area.
On K, when your normal traffic flow going into the cul-de-sac, you naturally wouldn't stop.
Right.
I mean, westbound on K. To turn onto 13th, you should actually yield because you're crossing traffic. You're crossing traffic. Coming up 13th, going straight across, you would again.
See, and
There
what,
wouldn't
and
be
now
any
that
people
there's
there.
that street, okay, say someone builds on K, and they're coming from 13th Street with no stop sign, entering that cul-de-sac, there's no accidents to date, but with that new street, I see that being a problem. Mm-hmm. So,
I think if you're gonna put one there, where she has it, you're gonna have to address South End as well, because you're gonna have conflicting traffic going into the same.
what are the rules on like an all-way stop sign?
I'd have to look them up. I have it.
It'd be the way the street turns right there at my house. It kind of widens, so I don't know how you would get the attention of.
Yeah, and that's where
traffic.
looking at one on K didn't seem sensible because
Yeah,
you have to put it so far
yeah,
back
exactly.
that it wouldn't draw attention
Right.
to actually be stopped in that area.
So maybe northbound traffic and the traffic coming out of the cul-de-sac might need a stop sign to yield traffic coming westbound.
Sorry? I'm trying to look at the diagram again.
Or we could put that stop sign right in the middle of your driveway.
Right.
Yeah, I was fixing to say.
There's a street light there. We can use that pole right there. Just slap one on.
We could build an island out that would control the speed of traffic.
Right.
That's,
Actually,
traffic circles are actually,
a roundabout would be perfect.
A roundabout.
actually,
I
those
just
were good.
love.
There it is by the city hall.
When I was reading through the traffic manual, I was like, well, they should have put a roundabout right there.
Oh gosh, don't be thinking about that.
Okay.
I was joking.
Those are actually the safest intersections and under design. Roundabouts. Less accidents.
Because you just keep going around and around.
Look,
and
it's Big
around.
Ben.
You don't know how to get off.
Right.
Could you see a cattle trailer going around a roundabout?
I'd like to see any kind of truck quit coming down Main Street, especially at 65 miles an hour.
So from a guideline standpoint, I'm not debating that what the MUTCD says about controlling the one with the least amount of traffic. I
Yeah.
do want to be clear that I think the concerns,
It is that northbound coming off 13th.
the concerns
I do see
for the,
concern there,
as
because I
that
didn't
grows
even
out,
think of that before.
yeah.
Yeah, if they're
As that
entering
grows
close.
out, the concerns, probably going to justify looking at it again at a later time. Chief and his team will, I'm sure, watch it as that grows out, and if there are issues, then we can look at it at that
We'll
time.
run into issues if it's approved the way it is right now.
With that new stop sign?
Yes. If you don't address the south end of it, you're gonna have the westbound and northbound traffic inputting into the same area without a regulation on either one.
Yeah,
It looks like there should be a yield sign on the,
Either a yield or stop at the corner of 13th and K.
going north.
Sorry,
So we just
15th,
get a-
whatever that is.
13.
That's 13.
But heading north, are you, right? Is that what you're talking about on the street, heading north-south? A stop or yield?
Roundabout, that little half right.
but not on the one going west.
It's gonna be too far.
I think she wants to make them bigger.
But I
How about those
understand.
signs? Those signs that say like westbound traffic does not stop.
Yeah, you can have signs.
Like you can put that, 50 feet before the intersection, and then have a stop sign. Or even, I mean, I know it hasn't been deemed a dangerous intersection, but I'm just thinking of all the signs I've seen in other, in other cities that.
Mhm.
Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to table the request for further review.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second on the table. Any comments? No comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. They told me I forgot my manners. And now that we're in other comments, I'd like to take a chance for our new board members to present themselves and out your name and what you do and where you're from. And why you're on the board. Why you wanted to be on the board.
Am I the only one?
No.
No.
Should have been four.
She's not here.
I'm Dave Rouser, pastor at Jackson Avenue Baptist Church, and I come to the city council meetings, and there's some things that I see that are problems, and instead of standing around griping about it, I was always taught that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, so I thought I'd throw in and help out. Whether people like it or not, that will be soon to be seen.
Welcome aboard.
My name is Joel Gomez. I've lived in Lovington all my life, and I just want to be more involved with the city. And David Trujillo asked if I'd like to serve on the board, and timing was perfect. That's kind of what I was looking for anyways. And here I am. I work in Hobbs. I've always worked in Lovington until about 2 years ago. But I feel because of that, I'm kind of detached from the city, so I wanted a way to kind of get back in.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
I'm Ron Humphrey. I've lived here since 1980. Had a couple of businesses here and there. And worked for Texaco for 16 years. My wife retired from Chevron. And I've been sort of involved off and on through the city. And I thought I'd like to get more involved here recently. And this opportunity came up, so I decided to put my name in the hat. So I'm kind of like Dave, Maybe we're not going to gripe on the outside, we'll gripe on the inside.
There you
That's
go.
what we're here for, is to
I'm excited to have new blood on here, and the commentary today was good. So appreciate that very, very much.
Glad to be here.
And do we also have another new member?
Brenda Garcia.
Brenda Garcia, she's not here. She works for Lee Cook.
She stated she had a funeral to attend.
We'll meet her next time.
Any other comments from committee?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion on the table then. Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.